You're listening to the Return Home podcast, the podcast about the podcast. What did we learn out of making this podcast in this very significant time, and what did we learn about the significant time that we
Hi, Eva,
faced?
and welcome back.
Hi, Alina. Thank you for being back with me too.
Yeah, we are coming towards the end of our journey home. At least for this podcast series.
Yeah.
And we thought about having like a wrap up of our experience together, our shared experience also with those who are listening to us to the previous podcasts.
Yeah. Yeah, we're doing a podcast about the podcast, so to speak. Yeah. I think it's a great idea. And I thought we switched sides maybe a little bit or alternate to have a conversation about, having this creative journey that we took on together, which I want to say thank you for taking the risk and the courage to go on a creative journey together. I really appreciated that myself. It was very insightful.
Thank you for joining this experience and sharing all these valuable and beautiful things along the way.
It was very exciting to me, and I guess what I appreciated was that we creatively weaved one topic that is so dear to me, which was the return home, as a metaphorical title of doing a playoff of the social distancing that was a necessity for all of us globally to kind of honor and mark the time. But then also taking one of the models that I love to educate in the Satir model, which was the Mandala of Self, almost like a roadmap to talk about different chapters of what it means to return home. And to me, at the beginning, it was an experiment. How could these things weave together and then have a conversation with the two of us, being in different locations, but also sharing maybe similar experiences or also differences to help the two of us navigate through the challenging time and find maybe a way to get to learnings. And I certainly learned a lot on the journey. So I'm now very curious to first throw the ball to you and ask you, Alina, what was your learning out of doing the podcast for yourself?
It was really very interesting how we started. So as you said, it was the beginning of the lockdown in a lot of places. And it was also where we both lived, although we live in different countries and different cities. And the return home was a theme that we both saw as a metaphor of expressing what we were both actually experiencing together with a whole planet, actually.
Yeah.
As everybody was inside their homes. And for me, that was also an inner journey. And an initial idea that I had while starting this conversation was to have them as a way of facilitating also a process of self-discovery and at the same time of becoming.
Yeah.
And although they sound a little bit paradoxical, how can you become while you discover? Actually, it is possible, and I have to admit that it was a process that was passing and was happening during this journey, and it's still continuing. And I think that this is probably one of the greatest learnings, that the initial intention that we have at the beginning of an endeavor, of something, of a project, is really important and essential even for the course of that project. And we did not frame it very strictly.
Yeah.
Our conversations had a lot of space to unfold, and yet they had this intention of having a certain framing and a certain message of sharing inner experiences, both personal and professional. And that kind of worked for me, I think, as a catalyst in my own process, and as a sort of mirroring and accelerating effect.
Yeah.
How was it for you?
Well, I love some of the things that you shared, and it brought me, you're so right. If you hold an intention that is clear on kind of a maybe vague image, but also a feeling level, to create a direction and a set of boundary, to have a certain theme that will help a boundary, that actually then the gift in that is that whatever you hold as an intention, the future will start to actualize and realize itself. And that was my experience as well. I had kind of a feeling about this could be a really important format. And then now looking back at it, I actually notice how helpful the intention, the structure, and the conversational pathway we took was for me. I can relate to what you said. I am usually teaching the Mandala of Self, and so I know about it, but this time was a unique way for me to almost facilitate the conversational chapters and at the same time living them in my own right and light. So I was allowing myself to move through my own inner journey that was authentic to the moment. As we're touching upon emotions, for example, I was very authentically connecting to all these different emotions that I felt already comfortable with or not comfortable with, but also really taking all the teachings that I usually do in terms of how to hold difficult feelings and be with them and befriend them rather than pushing them away, and really taking my own journey with my own self in the conversation with you. So what I learned very much was that the fact that we created a conversational structure, that you were part of the conversation, that we did it as a duo, then taking a model that was familiar to me and facilitating it, but also allowing myself to go on the experiential journey and have those three elements in play all at the same time. One, it's possible. Two, it has a great benefit because I felt I couldn't have moved through so elegantly, so fluent through some of the challenges that I was experiencing throughout these past weeks if we haven't done and designed this this conversation. I felt that this conversation had a very big potency in terms of healing quality for my personal self. So I am so grateful that you were given the space, being with me in the space, and it allowed me to probably move way more continuously fluid through my inner difficult process than I would have been able to do that alone. So that actually the podcast, the way it was designed, helped me to navigate myself through the past 10 weeks or so. It was probably in a way where the pressure is carving out the diamond. It's letting the diamond shine rather than pressure being pressure and putting things down. That's how I experience it.
Yeah, and I think that for things to be as they were, an important part was played by the time that we recorded these conversations.
Mhm.
I think that they were really connected to what is going on in our lives and in the collective environment.
Yeah.
All these challenges that are really new for a lot of us. And for sure, this conversation, at least this is my opinion, that these conversations would have looked completely different if they were recorded 6 months ago or 6 months from now. So the topics were really correlated with the present moment and what we both experienced in our lives, and also on a collective level in our societies.
Yeah. You know, not Virginia Satir, but I think there's an English saying that says the proof is in the pudding, meaning, you know, there's theory and then there's reality. And I think I heard my teacher Gunther Schmidt saying a quote where the difference between theory and practice, or between, you know, what's written in the books and the reality in the practice, is more significant in the reality and in the practice than in the books. Meaning, I can read a lot of stuff and it's all interchangeable. But once I'm in the reality, in the now, in the practice, I'm noticing what really makes a difference. And for me, I always believed in the work of the third birth, or the validation model, or the different names of the Satir work, Virginia Satir's work, that it's a reflection of how to navigate the reality of life, meaning relationships, meaning how I relate to myself, meaning how I communicate, meaning how I make sense of things so that I can organize myself, meaning how I can connect to my history and how the history is part of my identity and shaping me, but I don't have to stay in my history. All of those things. She has so many entrance points in talking about life itself. I always believed it's not just an approach. I always believed this is about life. This is a way of making it a describable way. But now that we were hitting the challenges and me being confronted with my shadows, unintegrated parts, my anxieties, my fears, my copings, my ways of dealing with certain situations, I was really confronted with the proof is in the pudding. This is reality. We're not talking theory. It's not, it's not a workshop in a comfort level. This is the workshop. That's the real deal. And what I learned through the help and your graciousness and generosity of you, that what I believe to be true, I could exercise in practice, that it is true for myself. And I think I have such a excitement and appreciation, and also, I want to say humbleness about how amazingly forward some people were thinking, like Virginia Satir or Carl Rogers. I mean, there's so many pioneers out there, and I wish Virginia could realize how forward she was thinking out and studying and researching about life itself, and bringing it into ways of how we can talk about it, study it, walk with it. And that was probably a big insightful learning for myself as well, how the theories or the special educational topics are real. They teach us about ourselves.
Isn't that interesting? We learn so many things, so many theories.
Yes.
And yet we are surprised when we are in situations that require us to walk the talk and to turn them into applied, manifested actions and attitudes.
Yeah.
That's an interesting way of presenting into the world, like showing up not for what you speak, but also for what you do and who you are as an individual.
Yeah.
And
You
in
know,
times of crisis, I think this is probably the most important thing to do.
yeah. Yeah, you know, through you, I also learned that what I do for work is who I am as well. There is no difference. This is me. And allowing me through a conversation with you actually allowed me to carve that out and really own that and get to know that about myself. What I teach is who I am as well. There's no difference between work and life. I always found that disturbing to talk about life work balance. For me,
Yeah.
life, and I have been lucky that I chose at one point that who I am as a person is also reflected through my profession, and I'm very grateful for having had that courage to put myself on a hero's journey to actually make that real, because it wasn't an easy path to do that. But this journey with you also allowed me to take appreciation to my own self, that I was risk taking to go on a hero's journey for myself to make my life a completeness of who I am, and that's including my profession. And it wasn't always that case. I used to have a profession that wasn't fully reflecting myself, and I felt torn, and I felt unhealthy, I felt sick, and I felt spiritually broken, and I was emotionally drained, and I was in a very bad place. And it took a lot to move back to this place, and it allowed me to kind of look back to the journey of my own. So thank you for that too.
Yeah, thank you for all these sharings and for all your journey. And I'm really honored for having you in these conversations and for sharing with me so many aspects of your own personal journey. And I think this is really valuable for all of us.
Any other learnings that you made?
I also got to learn that we are never too small, even if we think we are.
Yeah.
In some weird way, we are big and we are important. And we all matter. And we have a responsibility to speak and to get involved. And even if sometimes we think we are too small to matter, as I thought about it at the beginning, that this is the first time I'm recording podcasts ever, and who will listen to them and who will watch the conversations. And maybe it makes no sense to do all this work of putting them out there. I got to the feeling that everything counts.
Yeah.
And as you used to say in some of the workshops that I saw you, is that even if you do or you don't get involved or act in some way, that has an effect.
Yes.
That also has consequences. So
Yeah.
I took the challenge of of recording these and of putting them out. And that proved that, okay, it's a choice, it's a commitment. And maybe it's not 100% perfect, or it can be a lot better than it is. But it's a lot better than if it wasn't.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was another learning along the way.
That's awesome. And I have been, kind of spreading it to some of my communities, and I was very touched to hear that somebody would say, oh, the episode you were sending out today was exactly the perfect thing I needed to hear today. And it just brought me to connect to myself in a more appreciating way again, and allowed me to move through this day in a different fashion. So thank you for that. And, I realize if we take something positive out of the journey that the way we did it and took it on, and there's one other person that is touched in the right moment where you feel I'm hopeless, I'm helpless, or I'm worthless, or I feel disconnected from resources, I have to do it alone. And it does touch that one idea, I'm not alone. Somebody's touching a topic that really reflects something in me. And if it's that one person, I think that's what really counts. If it's then from there a few more, then even better. And I've been surprised that there were a number of people who were actually following up and watching and listening to the different episodes. So we did touch not just us, but other people as well. And I find that's where the beginning point is. If it's making sense to us, and that's the judgment, and then it touches the next person, I think that's where the congruency radiates out to a bigger purpose, making sense on a larger scale as well. So
Yeah, I think that I strongly believe in the wisdom of life, and I think that it's I believe in the wisdom of life more than in my own wisdom or the individual wisdom. And I strongly believe that if this interaction needed to be manifested through us and our message touches someone, then it needed to be expressed and its purpose was full. And if that was done through our conversation or through the things that we expressed, as you said, with congruency and with full honesty in our conversations and our sharings, I think this is something that was worthwhile.
yeah. I heard actually Oprah saying in one of her thank you speeches, I think about 2 years ago or so in January, I heard her say the greatest gift that you can give to the world is speaking your own truth. And there is something to me to that. I feel the greatest gift that we can give each of us to the world is speaking our inner truth, and that may continuously update itself, because I only know what I know about myself and I don't know what I don't know. But when I am on the self-discovery journey, I will continue to learn more about myself through positive, acknowledging, accepting, loving conversations with others that help me to awaken to more of myself. And that's what I treasure between the two of us. You are, in the way you're holding a conversational space, are helping me to awaken more and more to myself in my own truth, in my own right. And I do hope I am that potentially for you too. And if not, I'm willing to take the feedback and, what are the adjustments we need to make for the conversation so that's true for both of us. Because when we do that for each other, I do feel that everybody can stand up tall and the best who they are. And the stronger I am inside of myself, the more I can be open to differences to others, how they are different, maybe in religion or spirituality, or how they live the world, that they love meat and I'm a vegetarian, but that is not a problem to be different. Or maybe somebody likes strawberry ice cream and I prefer a rhubarb or a nut ice cream, and that's not a problem, but it's just different flavors. I do strongly believe the more we're truthfully showing up in our own self, the more we can hold with grace and curiosity the differences of each other. And it does need conversations in order to help awaken more and more to our own selves in the things that we don't know about ourselves yet, but can find them through the beautiful eyes of somebody else like you.
Yes, I truly believe that we are who we are in interactions with other people, and the fact that we call ourselves in a certain way or in certain ways is validated in our interactions with other people, because otherwise it's just only in our minds or only in our imaginations.
Yeah.
But as a manifested identity is through our interactions with other people. And I really loved our interactions as they were in this space of honesty, which is really important for me.
Mm-hmm.
And it gives the space a certain energy and a certain capacity to bring into the space and into the awareness things that otherwise would probably be left unknown or undiscovered. And that was also the fact when I said that it was a story of discovering and of becoming, because that they were a lot of times happening at the same time.
Yeah.
And it was a little by little discovery of something new, and then becoming. And by becoming, I understand that it's a choice making process.
Yeah.
Not becoming by default, but becoming by awareness and by choosing. And this is, I think, an experience that cannot be possible in another space that is not built with these structures, with this energy in it.
Yeah. I think something else comes to my mind as you speak. When I think about ingredients that were naturally supporting our quality of conversation, I realized I felt safe throughout the whole process. I always felt that I was in a space where I was honored safely as a person and not being judged or maybe talked behind the back or something like that. You know, some of the exercises, maybe some of us may have made as an experience in other contexts. I felt seen, I felt safe throughout this whole process. And so I really felt I could show up. I could really speak my truth, because it does need a certain contextual psychological safety in order to be able and then willing to show up as me with strength and with vulnerability. I was noticing the ingredients of acceptance, of a yes setting. To put it in Ericksonian words, there was a yes. Like whatever I said, you picked up and you made it something else and adding to it. And the same true the other way around. There was a yes and a yes and a yes and a yes. It's a lot of yes and instead of, oh, you can't think about it that way. That's a wrong idea that you're just presenting. There was a lot of yes plus on both sides, which I very much treasure and find such a important ingredient for good conversation. There were great questions that, you know, put us in the internal journey of self-discovery that I really treasured so much. And throughout this whole time, I felt so much love, you know, like in the Greek sense, I felt love for the friendship, love for the sisterhood, love for the family. So kind of agape, kind of a universal love that was threading me and you and us throughout this whole conversation. I don't know how you felt about it, but I felt like throughout this whole time, I felt so much love that, yeah.
Yeah, I can totally relate to that. And for me, as I said earlier, it was a challenge, accepting to do this, and something very new. And I would not have done this by myself, for sure. I mean, if that was not in a format of a conversation, I would not have done that to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
And I thank you for that, and for creating this experience that was so beautiful, and we learned so much along the way. And I think the ingredients that you mentioned earlier are really ingredients that can impact any relationship with this change of energy and of quality of the relationship. It can be between I don't know, a coach and a client, a therapist and a client, a family relationship between two members of the same family, or more.
Yes.
Two, or a group of colleagues at work. But it's something that we are not really used to create and to feel. And I speak from my own experience. Only in very close relationships I was exposed to this kind of experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And in very few interactions with few people I can feel safe enough, or I have the feeling that it's appropriate for me to express certain things.
Yeah.
And not having to behave in a certain way as it is required, or is it politically correct, let's say, in a more bombastic fashion. But to be true to myself, and to even admit that I'm maybe confused with my own truth.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe sometimes I'm not clear about what my own truth is.
Yeah.
And then be given the space to explore even that,
Mm-hmm.
to question even that. Because if my truth is not my truth, validated firstly from my perspective, then it does not have the quality of my own truth spoken to other people.
Yeah.
And in our interactions, I felt that I can have the space of being confused in discovering and exploring my own truth.
Mm.
And I come again to that paradox of discovering and choosing and becoming.
Yeah, you're right. I became aware of that we were actually putting in action a number of principles that I learned on a theory base in the self-relations or generative trans work based on the Ericksonian principles. To just summarize some of them and summary of our culture that we were creating. One, where actually we were talking on eye level. I felt that we were really meeting each other on eye level, and not one being the expert and the other one being something else, but really meeting on a conversational eye level. Then we were actually using the yes setting that I was just mentioning. So taking in consideration what the opinion of the other is and making more of that and adding to it, which I find needs the quality of the psychological safety in the first place. We were exercising the principle of creative acceptance, like accept in everything that's coming, including our own inner struggles. We were able to make room for inner struggles and creatively accepting that as part of our conversation, so that every player in the conversation had a space that would be acknowledged, which is a very unique culture. and it helps to lift up to a more generative trance field if you wish. We were also being with complementarities. We could hold opposites without having to choose one side, but we could be with the joy and the grief. We could be with the anger and maybe playfulness. I mean, seemingly opposite experiences were being able to be part of the conversation, which is also one of the Ericksonian principles, to hold opposite truths both at the same time without needing to choose one over the other. And I guess there was another principle that came to me from the self-relations work, and that was about proper naming. I heard Stephen Gilligan talk about the importance of labeling something that is true for you, proper naming, which in my understanding is that if you can talk about things in a certain language way, and it seems to be the right label, the right meaning making for now, which is a way of proper naming in our interest, then I can integrate it, I can absorb it in and make it my experience. And as soon as we can integrate everything, that is what's creating wholeness. That's what's creating more fullness and more authenticity. It doesn't have to be pretty or looking shiny. It makes sense, and it's part of my story, and this is true. This is how I experience it, and this is the right name to language it, or the right meaning making. And we were giving that space, and I found that so elegant. And we haven't even scripted this out. It just kind of happened. It just emerged, and I felt the quality of love, the quality of respect for each other, the quality of meeting on eye level, and the quality of respecting psychological safety, to me, was really the bathing waters that allowed all of these principles naturally to present themselves as the deeper truth of how to create a trance experience that is positive, to lift into a new becoming, as you were speaking, through a certain lens of talking about things. And it was quite a journey. It was almost like we were doing a world tour or something without traveling. I felt like we're traveling continents without traveling in itself.
Yeah, and I think some contribution may have had also the times when we had these conversations, because each time something new was happening in our home space, in our personal space, in the collective space. And these were not usual or common times. These were actually extraordinary times, and I think probably for the first time in history, such a great number of people experienced almost the same conditions and almost the same restrictions.
Yes.
And that was a collective experience that we at some point framed as a global retreat. And we discussed about that in some of the podcasts of this series, but had a lot of impact also on the way we were seeing things, and on the way we were seeing the role of each of us in this bigger picture.
Yeah. You know, I think we were able to be without becoming, without drowning into negative experience, but being with it, acknowledging the reality that was presented in front of us. And to me, the relationship space helped me to actually be with, rather than becoming or denying and driving off of my copings that I usually like to do, or flirt with my coping and say, oh, I like to distract, but I choose not to. and be with the experience for now, because with Alina it feels safe. I have to admit, I completely fell in love with you as a friend. I mean, I adored you anyways already, but it brought me so really close, and appreciating you as this amazing human being and woman, and you know, your amazing mind and your wisdom that you bring, and I just completely fell in love with the totality of you through this process, and I'm really happy about that.
I'm really honored, and I felt it throughout the conversations. Me being allowed to show up as myself, and not having to present myself as somebody else.
Yeah.
And I truly want to thank you for that, and for allowing that to happen, and being such a clear mirror for me to sometimes discover new things about myself, and then maybe get to a point of making some choices of what I keep and what I let go.
Right.
Yeah, and in every relationship, I think this is a very essential ingredient, but it's yet an ingredient pretty rare to find.
Yeah.
Allowing a person to express fully in front of another, I think it's probably some of the most honorable human things to do.
That's
but
what Virginia calls the third birth.
yeah, we are not really educated in this way.
Yeah.
So we are a lot of times trying to fit the box, and to do things as they tell us to do. And yeah, I think maybe one of the contributions that I personally would have as intention for our conversation would be to somehow mark a reference in this regard of presenting oneself in his or her true nature, true self. I'm sure, and I know this is not very common thing to do, and not very easy, and it needs a certain space. But I think little by little we can bring our contribution to creating such kind of spaces in our relationships, and maybe these spaces will unite and become a bigger space.
Yeah. I wholeheartedly support that. I think it needs the right ingredients, spaces that allow people to fully show up in their own truth and to live the third birth, to put it in Virginia Satir's words. I believe it's not an easy path, and it's a possible, and it holds certain ingredients, as we said, and it's important to me. It's one of the important things, and I totally support it. And I love what you said at the end. It's about creating choices. So that may be definitely another thing to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for having made the choice to conduct the series together. It feels like a nice ending, and I'm noticing a little tear running down my face that is letting me know we're about to finish something up. And I know that ending is good, to have a fresh beginning. So I look forward, as we end this, to a fresh beginning for something that comes and gives birth after this. So thank you for this for now.
Thank you. Love you.
Love you too.